You got lost souls redefining what's wrong and what's right. Blind men unable to tell between darkness and light. Of things that they stood for.
This is Pastor Sam and Patrick No Compromising Evil Wyett back together again.
Yeah, boy, doesn't that just feel great here? And I mean, we've got a little bit of a different setup. You guys probably don't notice a whole lot, but we've got a totally different setup.
We've been tinkering with it for a bit.
Yeah, that's why we're a little bit late. Sorry about that. But here we are with like I said here, a different setup. But today we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter, and of course your recent article, Patrick, Revolution USA, No Lives Matter. Now that's a pretty interesting title, first of all. So I'm going to start off by asking you, where'd you come up with that title?
You know, I was thinking about revolution because that's what we're experiencing right now. If you haven't thought about it in that manner, that's exactly what's going on. The people that are perpetrating this have certainly been thinking of it as a revolution, and this is something they've been planning for many years now, decades even, and it's finally kicked off and rolling for them. The time was right. So I wanted to get that in there, that this is what we're experiencing right now is, at least from their perspective, a revolution. You may look at it as a civil war or insurrection, various things, but this is an active attempt to overthrow and destroy the government that's in place, and of course the society and culture that's behind it. So that's where that part came from, Revolution USA.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course No Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter is very prominent in what's going on right now. They seem to be the group that's taken center stage. And my point there was, but really to Black Lives Matter, No Lives Matter. This is a Marxist movement. And anybody that is valuable to them is only valuable in a moment as far as them pushing their agenda. So not everybody's life matters, especially actual innocent black victims of crime. We'll talk about that in the article, where this is all going and what's happening every day. Nobody cares about them. The only lives that matter would be, for the most part, black criminals that are killed in law enforcement incidents. So that's their trumpeting, that's what they're putting out in front of people. This is the videos they're showing. And in some instances, such as the George Floyd video, yeah, it looks like that definitely needs to be investigated and justice is being done there. Other things like the Rayshard Brooks incident in Atlanta, where a guy was out on parole, was drunk, driving, passed out in his car. Police come up to him. If you watch the video, very cordial to him. They do a field sobriety check, which he fails. And they're going to arrest him because he legally can't drive and he has broken the law. Well, he decides at that point he's going to start resisting arrest to the point where he's fighting the cops. He gets underground with two of them. I don't know what he was on, but he looked to be a pretty strong guy. He's kind of throwing those guys around sometimes, and I'm not saying there was any drugs in his system. He was certainly drunk. But he was able to take a taser away from one of them, punch another one in the face, fight him, and then take off running and point back the taser at the officer that was chasing him. The other one was kind of stunned, so he wasn't really, he just got punched in the face. And the officer saw the weapon and he drew and fired him and ultimately killed Mr. Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's kind of what happens when you resist arrest violently and then point a weapon, which not 2 weeks prior, the district attorney in Atlanta had said that the taser in Georgia is considered a deadly weapon. So in the heat of the moment, the officer maybe didn't know that that was the other guy's taser. What it was, he knew he was getting pointed at something, so he responds the way he's supposed to, which is defend his life.
Right.
Bottom line in that particular case is, if you're committing a crime and the police show up, don't resist arrest. Number one, don't commit the crime and the police probably won't be showing up. But number two, this is good for anybody. I don't care what the color of your skin is. Be cordial to the officers, comply, live to see another day. Or you can fight and greatly escalate your chances of injury or death, which is what happened. But when this happened, of course, now there's this big explosion again of anger that this is happening all across society, that this is not right. And here we are in the throes of revolution.
Are you saying we shouldn't go and pick cops up, throw them on the ground, beat them up, and take their taser from them?
Typically not a good idea.
Yeah,
you're gonna draw a response from the responding officers because that's their life on the line too. Can people be beat to death? Yes. Can an officer who has a pistol on him, which is a lethal weapon, if you get an officer, and this has happened where an officer would be in a fight and the officer's weapon taken from him or her, and they are shot and killed with their own weapon. So anytime you're tangling with a police officer in that manner, you've just escalated it from whatever you're being arrested for to a potential life and death situation. So I don't know why people can't understand that. In a nation of laws, that's how it is.
Right, and that's that's a really big thing when you go and you look at this, and people are going and they're talking about how oh, this wasn't an actual murder, or excuse me, they're saying it was an actual murder. In fact, he's being tried for first-degree murder, I believe, and which, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Georgia have a death penalty?
They say in Georgia, if he were convicted of that crime, that he would be eligible for the death penalty.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I mean, that's a pretty big deal for this police officer. But I mean, we look at these kind of things and we go, well, was he actually acting in self-defense? I mean, can somebody beat somebody to death, especially after he just whooped two people? And then, I've never been tased, but I'm sure it doesn't feel good. And who knows, a drunk guy, how long he's going to tase somebody, because I think as long as you hold down that trigger, isn't that how the taser works for the police officers?
And here's the thing too. Again, the other officer he'd just been in a fight. If you've ever been in a fight, things get kind of jumbled. So one officer's kind of out of commission, tailing back. This officer's chasing. He sees a guy turn, not realizing what's in his hand. He just sees pistol shaped in the dark on the run across a parking lot. I mean, your first instinct when somebody aims back at you with something in their hand which looks like a pistol is what? The guy's going to shoot me.
Right.
You're not thinking like, well, I wonder if that's a real pistol, or is that? Well, I mean, what is that? Is it? You don't have those seconds to contemplate. You have to react to protect your life. And again, you're never justified, except in the most extreme instances, to resist a police officer. If he's doing something completely and totally illegal or trying to kill you without cause, of course you can defend yourself. But in this case where you're being arrested for a crime that you know you committed, and then you escalate that situation. But the real problem there is what happened. Yes, it's terrible. It's too bad it happened. But when a portion of the community comes out and starts looting and rioting and burns a Wendy's restaurant, starts blocking off the street, threatening people, doing all manner of things, and the police officers are told to stand down and watch crime occur, which is not enforcing law, but giving way to the mob. This is aiding and abetting insurrection from the level of the political people that are telling the police officers to stand down. But can you imagine what that does to morale within the department as well? Well, you've seen what happened. A bunch of them start calling in sick.
Right. Well, and this is kind of an overarching thing of what's been going on throughout our nation with this lawlessness that's going on. I mean, that's the ultimate problem. And in fact, in your article, you kind of point this out. This started with in Minneapolis, but it spread throughout the entire nation. And in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, you say that the spirit, well, the Bible says, you're just quoting the Bible here, it says that the spirit of lawlessness would be there, or the coming Antichrist, the man of sin,
which is lawlessness, right? Sin is lawlessness. He's called the man of sin, which is the man of lawlessness. And now that spirit, I said in the article, is in our streets today. You can see it. Everybody knows about it. If you've been anywhere near a television set in the last few weeks, or anywhere near a computer, or even the talk, where you work, as this is on people's minds, you know what's going on. It's unheard of in our day and age. I mean, it happened in limited scales at different places at different times in our recent history, but to see it so widespread, but not only widespread, entire city governments now bowing knee to it, therefore being complicit, and governors. And these, of course, are the liberal Democrats. These are areas where this is happening predominantly.
Of course, the biggest one is CHOP or Chaz or whatever they're calling it today over in Seattle.
Yep.
The lawless zone, the spirit of lasciviousness or something like that, we could say. But even today, as I believe they came out and they said that they're going to start working on getting some law and order back. The big issue is that today, I don't know if you saw this on the Epic or Epoch Times.
I've been at work, so
but they came out with an article saying that Seattle's city council passed an ordinance, or they passed something to remove the ordinance of loitering for prostitution and drugs. And they said,
that's going to make for a much more moral and safe climate there, isn't it?
Right. They said that they don't want to make those sex workers and drug workers feel criminalized.
You mean they don't want to make criminals feel criminalized for their criminal activities?
I mean, what a crazy thing.
This is what happens when you vote socialist in. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the way they think.
Right. But let's talk about Black Lives Matter, because I'm sure that everybody probably has a decent grasp of what's going on, at least a little bit. But the question is, at least with the events of what's going on, but what about what's behind these things? I mean, is Black Lives Matter? That's a great phrase, isn't it? I mean, don't you believe that Black Lives Matter?
Mm-hmm. Of course, when you say all lives matter, of course, then they come completely ballistic, because that takes away from Black Lives Mattering. Now, this kind of brings up an interesting question as we get into Black Lives Matter. So there's this discussion of racism. Is racism ever mentioned in the Bible by name, Pastor Sam? Is the word racism in the Bible?
No.
And why is that?
Well, because the Bible actually teaches that there's, in fact, not 5 races, not 6 races, not 3 races, but one race.
Ah. So there's one race, therefore there can't be racism. Now, there are different ethnicities.
Right.
So there is the sin that the Bible does talk about, the sin of partiality, which is favoring one group or people over others, or not liking a group or people over others. And this is not just about skin color. This is about economic class and a variety of different things, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So we're not to show partiality based on appearances. It's actions that determine our character and our person, not the color of our skin, not our economic status or a variety of other things that Satan tries to divide us over, and his minions work in that same way. But so we have Black Lives Matter.
Right. Now, if it's actions, this group Black Lives Matter, that's kind of an interesting thing, especially when you start to look at their ideology.
Yes. So the thought is that Black Lives Matter is a civil rights organization, that they're peacefully marching to bring justice to people that are not getting justice, and they've drug a few other groups in with them to align with them. But they're looking to help the underprivileged or the ones that are suffering injustice in our society. And of course, with an emphasis on blacks.
Yeah. Now, in your article here, you say prominent amongst the street thugs are Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Communist Antifa promotes the anarchy and chaos, while Black Lives Matter, BLM, justifies it by pushing the political communist solution to the problem they created, disbanding law enforcement, forced redistribution of wealth, destruction of capitalism, etc. Black Lives Matter is not a civil rights organization.
It's not a civil rights organization at all. It is a communist front group. It is totally communist through and through. The 3 young ladies that founded Black Lives Matter are acknowledged that they're black, but they're also Marxist lesbians. So this is where the origins of this comes from. So if you're a Marxist, and not just like, well, I kind of think that's kind of cool. These are organizers. These are people that are thinking strategies. How do we push the communist revolution that's been building in this country for these years? How do we do that? Well, it's not a secret that the communists, even back in the 50s and even going back to the 20s, were looking at the United States saying, well, this is a pretty powerful nation. It's a nation that's very well-versed in capitalism. It's got the blessings of capitalism. How do we attack a nation like that? What natural things can we use to our advantage? In Russia, they use just social economic status. So the poor versus the rich. Well, in America, the poor were doing pretty good compared to the rest of the world too. The rich, of course, are always doing well, no matter where they are in the world. But let's drag up some envy on that. But the United States is kind of unique in the fact that it has many people, many ethnicities in that country.
The melting pot, right?
That's what they call this, was a melting pot. So if we can take those ethnic differences, pit them against one another, well, we may have some gold right here. And that's exactly what happened. They were planning this sort of racial strife from the 20s. Again, in the 50s, there was a former black communist. His name was Manning Johnson. And Manning Johnson was involved in the Communist Party for, I believe, around 10 years. He finally saw through the lies of what they were doing, that they were manipulating black people to try to get them to be expendable pawns in the revolution they were trying to foment in the United States. They were trying to start a race war to divide this nation, and through division to conquer it, because Christ said a house divided against itself cannot stand.
That's right.
Satan knows this, and the people that work for Satan know this. So that's been their idea all along. Well, Manning Johnson put out a book in 1958 called, what was it? Color, Communism, and Common Sense. And it's available online if you want to read it. You just type that in, Manning Johnson, Color, Communism, Common Sense. And he has like 10 short chapters. You can read it pretty quickly.
Almost a pamphlet more than a book, right?
Yeah, more of a pamphlet. And I've actually, in the article that I wrote, I've quoted him on a few different things. And he's showing you how the communists bring envy and anger up in people, minority groups, for the express purpose, not of setting them free or not for giving them justice, because one of the most unjust systems in the world is communism.
That's right.
They oppress, they enslave, they kill. I mean, the communists are God. And that's what they want to bring to this country. We've got several histories of nations, not just in the past, but in the present. You look at places like North Korea and China, there's no justice there. there's an all-powerful central government that if you run afoul of, you end up disappearing in the night, you and your family, you're never saw again. So this is what they're trying to do here. But they're using the ethnic differences now to cause a natural conflict between whites, blacks, or whomever else.
And this is Gramsci's model of cultural Marxism.
Yeah, Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist, captured by the fascists because the communists and fascists were fighting it out in Italy in the 30s. The fascists won, so he was put in jail. But Gramsci came up with the idea that the way to take down the United States was to go after its Christian roots. That a nation steeped in Christian tradition could not be taken down until those roots were cut. So ultimately what we're seeing is the struggles today are not just against capitalism per se, though that's certainly part of it. You'll see that in Black Lives Matter, the talking points, when you start understanding how the communists communicate and how they talk, you'll see these words, and it tips you off real quickly where they're coming from. But with that in mind, so Gramsci said we need to attack Western civilization, the basis of which is Christianity. So this ultimate revolution is against Western civilization. You see that with everything related to identification of this country, the flag. Well, let's burn the flag. Let's kneel during the national anthem. Oh, we're not disrespecting the flag. Yes, you are. You're disrespecting the country. Let's start tearing down monuments. Well, it's interesting that they're tearing down the monuments, which are symbols of our nation's history. Like it or not like it, that's what it is. One of the communist 45 planks, in 1958, Cleon Skousen put out a book called The Naked Communist.
Mm-hmm.
It was read, these 45 communist goals, read into the Congressional Record in 1963. The 45 things that communists at the time wanted to accomplish to take America from the capitalist constitutional republic to a communist nation. One of the things was to destroy artwork, to take down statues and that sort of thing. And then was to change the culture by attacking everything that had cultural relevance to this country, and to destroy our nation from that point. When you destroy, I think George Orwell said, when you destroy a nation's history or a nation's past, that's the quickest way to destroy a nation, was to get rid of their history. The people don't know their own history anymore. And there's the good and the bad history in this nation. But there's a lot more good history compared to any other nation on earth. We were the nation that actually fought a war to get rid of slavery. We're a nation that fought a war of independence so we could start the process of getting rid of slavery, which happened in the northern colonies or northern states. And then it took 83 years later for the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War to finalize the ending of slavery, which had been a worldwide system to every culture, every ethnicity since the time of man. Right. So that's where we're at. And so all this is ignored.
No, we're systemically racist.
Yeah, systemically. Well, here's the interesting thing. There's a claim from Black Lives Matter and other affiliated groups that there's a systemic police brutality and systemic racism in police departments. It's been going back for generations. And they're claiming it in what areas, Pastor Sam?
They're claiming it in what areas?
Yeah. What cities are these? Is there any commonality in these cities that this claim is being made?
Let me think here. Probably cities like Baltimore.
Okay, that's one of them.
Minneapolis?
Definitely.
Atlanta?
Yes.
St. Louis?
Absolutely. New York City?
LA?
Chicago? Detroit? LA? All these big cities. Seattle?
Wait.
All the places where these riots are occurring.
They all have really bad sports teams. No, that's not it. They're all Democrats. That's right.
So if this is systemic, the system they're talking about being systemic a part of is the Democrat-controlled political systems that run these cities. Right. If it is indeed systemic in these cities, and it has been for generations, the Democrats have been controlling these cities for decades and generations.
And I'll be the first to tell you Democrats are racist because they're employing critical race theory.
Well, they're the party of the Klan, they're the party of slavery, they're the party of Jim Crow laws, they're the party that actually filibustered the 1964 Civil Rights Act for 75 days. Stood against it in 1964. So if there's a systemic problem in these institutions, the institutions are Democrat run. The problem is not with America. The problem is within Democrats in power for too long. I'm not a partisan Republican per se.
Right.
And I've said before, the Republicans aren't always the answer. But I'm telling you, look on your streets and see what's going on. The Democrats are never the answer.
That's right. Absolutely right. Now, one thing that you put here is that if Black Lives Matter were truly concerned about crime and poverty amongst blacks, they'd address direct source of it. High incidence of black babies being born into single mother homes. You want to talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And how that's a big part important part of this, because I think that really the main issue is that when people start crying out racism, a lot of times they don't realize the other factors that go into play with this. And the reality of it is that God's design is always the best design. He designs things to work. He doesn't design things like a Chevy. He designs them like a Ford, for it to work. Now, I just ticked off half the people, and they just jumped off of our viewership. But it was a joke. It was a joke. But he does design things to work. And one of the things he designed was the family. And when you rip the family apart, you don't have the family the way that it ought to work, well, what's the consequences?
Well, yeah, there's always consequences for rebelling against God. And God doesn't put down the moral law because he's just this mean guy that likes to exercise his authority over us. Everything he does, when you look at it, is for our own good, and he sees it from his vantage point, that to obey his moral laws and precepts are good for you as an individual, good for your family, good for a nation, good for a society. But when you don't do these things, there are natural consequences because you've now went against the design that he has put in place. So with that in mind, Larry Elders was interviewed by Dave Rubin a while back. That's a very good piece. Larry Elders being a black man, of course, he's attacked for his views of telling the truth and on this subject. But like the big incident, and not just in the black community, but it's a growing problem across the nation. Any place this happens, regardless of ethnicity, then you get the same results, and that is when children are born into a single mother home. This is the number one and leading indicator for crime, poverty, low test scores, STDs, unwanted pregnancies, need for public assistance, suicide, depression, substance abuse, you name it. This dramatically increases the chances of that child of being involved in these terrible indicators for their life and how they're going to live their life and how they're going to carry on when they're born into a single-parent home. God ordained marriage between a man and a woman, and within that setting only that children are to be born. When children are born into that setting, regardless of ethnicity, they stand a very great, or they don't stand, but they have a very much higher incident of success in life. Success being not being in jail, not being murdered, not murdering people, not any of these things that we were just talking about. So that's the problem. So when you're born into a single family home, and that usually is the mother, the father's not there, that's a life of misery for that child.
Now, so here's the thing, though. Is Black Lives Matter really against the family? I mean, how could you say that they're against the family?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So you go, well, these guys, they maybe they're a little bit Marxist, but I mean, you're kind of getting in deep water here. I mean, who would be against that sort of thing? Well, you go to their website, Black Lives Matter, and what we believe. And there's a quote taken directly from their website. Would you like to read that, what they say?
We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Black Lives Matter website under what we believe. So, I mean, that's right from the horse's mouth here. We're not talking about something that we're making up. We're not talking about an inference. They're coming out here and saying they're against the Western, well, they say that we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family. We disrupt what they're saying, God's prescribed family, because that is
so
the
Western prescribed,
yeah.
Western civilization, the root being Christianity. So the Western prescribed nuclear family that they're disrupting, that they oppose then, is the family is ordained by God himself. A mother, a father, living in the same house, married, having children and raising those children together.
Right. That's what their stated goal is Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And so it's really when they're saying Black Lives Matter, they're saying that they don't matter within the nuclear family. They matter within a greater village, which once again comes back to this assumption, not just assumption, because it's stated by one of the founders, June 18th, 2020, not too long ago, that they are Marxist. They're trained Marxists, and they're Marxists. That's what Black Lives Matter is, and we're not.
Patrice Cullors said that in a tweet, that we are trained Marxists.
You want me to read that one too?
Yeah. And so if there's any doubt in your mind whether they are Marxist, we told you that they're against the family, but if you can read their stuff. I understand their language, collectively this and collect. So a totalitarian or a communist is a collectivist. You don't have individual rights. You're part of a collective. But this is what one of their co-founders, Patrice Cullors, said. One of the three young ladies I was telling you about earlier.
Yeah, she said the first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia, Garza, in particular, are trained organizers. We are trained, what's that word right there?
Marxists.
Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really tried to do is build a movement that could utilize many, many black folk. Now hold on here. This word that jumps out to me is utilize.
Mm-hmm.
Utilize. So Black Lives Matter wants to utilize many, many black folks.
They want to use many, many black folks.
That's right. They're just being duped, used, and tools. And the sad thing about this, it's not just that they're using many black folks, but it's starting to be that they're using more and more evangelical pastors than they are even using black folks.
And the white folks are involved in this too. So, and don't take what we're saying is a blanket statement against black people. Most black people are not involved in this. Most black people don't want their communities burned down. Most black people are the victims of crime. Young black males raised in that single mother home I was telling you about, though blacks comprise 12.3% of the population, they commit over half the murders in this country. And that is a problem with the morality being taught and pushed in these areas where you have in some cities in the black community, you have 70-90% rates of children being born into single mother homes. This is a terrible thing. I don't care what color you are, all part of the human race. This is a terrible thing for our society to be enduring. And this is what's happening. And then everything that comes after that. Young black males are 6 to 8 more times likely to commit crimes, violent crimes in different categories, than white or Hispanic males. And again, it points to the fact that these high rates of being born in the to single mother homes. But as this rate increases in whites and other ethnicities, you see the same results. It's just that the blacks were specifically targeted back in the 60s with legislation from Lyndon Baines Johnson to specifically try to subsidize and get black women to start having babies without men being present, knowing it would destroy the family, knowing it would make them dependent on government, and knowing that then with the government and the Democratic Party representing who's sending you a check every month, you could establish a voting bloc of people that were basically your slaves. They brought them back into slavery, the people that had been freed from slavery. And it's a terrible thing. And Republicans have not addressed it forthrightly at all because they're afraid of being called what? A racist if you bring these things up. These people are worth our efforts. All people are worth our efforts.
Well, and by self-admittance here, in this where it says, is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many black folk. Isn't she basically saying that she's the racist?
Well, it is a racist organization, so it's very much, it aligns with the Nation of Islam, which is a black supremacist mix of that, black nationality, black nation, whatever, with Islam and ideas along those lines. It's not even pure Islam, it's kind of a hybrid version with black supremacy that at its core is very much racist. Well, you just read the, from, actually didn't. So along those lines there's a February 9th tweet, and I'm going to read it. I wrote it down so I would not mess it up. It's from Yusra Kogali. Kogali, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She is the Black Lives Matter co-founder of Toronto, Canada chapter. And on February 9th, she tweeted, "Please Allah, give me strength to not cuss/kill these men and white folks out here today." Now, obviously, there's that mix of Islam which hates everybody and would subjugate the world under Islam, and then of course kill these white folks out here today. So this kind of stuff she got some flack for it, and rightfully so. And she's going, it's not a big deal. Look at all the other good stuff we do. And then she took the tweet down. So she just can't understand why people would be upset by her putting out this blatantly racist tweet. But if somebody white were to put this out and say, kill these brown folks, kill these yellow folks, kill these black folks, why the media would be all over that. Oh. And rightfully so, they should be. But Black Lives Matter gets a pass because they're perceived and they're projected as a civil rights group simply looking for justice for the underprivileged. And again, they're a communist group. They're a communist front group. They're using this angle. They're using their own racism and covering it with the righteousness of being against racism.
That's right. That's what they're doing here. And let's look a little bit into that that book that you were talking about. Well, first of all, before we get into that, because I think this is a really good point that you made in your article, because you're using this word communist quite a bit. And a lot of times people go and they say, well, communism you're just a conspiracy theorist if you use that, because don't you know that communism died in 1989 when the walls of Berlin came down?
I've actually been to the Berlin Wall, by the way. Yeah. There's a
in
section that was still
1989,
up.
were you the one who knocked it down?
I wasn't there at that time.
Oh man,
I
was getting real
I
excited.
was Johnny
on that
come
one.
lately on that one.
But you know that's how a lot of people think about these kind of things. Is
Yeah.
they go out there and they say, "What are you talking about? Why are you using this? You're a conspiracy theorist. Why are you talking about this? Did communism die
in 1989. That was what we were told. We won the Cold War. Communism was no more. The Soviet Union collapsed. It was replaced by Russia, and that now the world's a better place. Put your arms down. Take down your guard and go living life happily because communism is dead. What happened is communism changed tactics, at least on the Russian front. Today, Vladimir Putin, who's the president for life of Russia, former KGB officer, communist. You hear some good stuff about him, but the dude's a communist. He liked to reestablish the Soviet Empire. But nothing ever happened to communist China, did it? Nothing ever happened to communist North Korea or these various communist insurgencies in Central and South America, communism in Vietnam and different places. They never went away. And communist China today, by the way, has had his hand in things behind the scenes on our streets, fomenting these revolutionary groups, training them just as the Russians did, and putting money into it and providing intel and even weapons in some instances. There's a long history of that going on to this day. The desire to take this country down has never waned, has never wavered with these people. Our perceptions of what they're doing does when these events happen, like the Berlin Wall coming down, but that's just a distraction to get us to kind of look the other way and start thinking about other things. They never lose focus. They're relentless. And what we see now, finally, from their perspective, is some major headway being gained where we have our streets in an open revolt against our republic and against people. We have fear in our streets. We have police officers either fearful to respond or unable to respond by direct order from, say, the mayor or like-minded city councils. And we're at a place now where it's insurrection.
That's right. Absolutely. It is insurrection. And I want to go over one quote here from Manning Johnson that you had. Now, this is a little bit of a longer one, so we're not going to look at the whole quote. But one thing I want to get to is this part where he says, to one familiar with red trickery, which red is communism, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they were called back in the day. People recognize them by red.
Mm-hmm.
They were the red communists.
Better dead than red?
Better dead than red,
That's
yeah.
It is obvious that placing the blame for all Negroes' ills at the door of white leaders in America is to remove all responsibility from the Negro. This tends to make the Negro, and once again, this is a quote from Manning Johnson, to A, feel sorry for himself, B, blame others for his failures, C, ignore the countless opportunities around him, D, be jealous of the progress of other racial and national groups, E, expect the white man to do everything for him, and F, look easy and quick solutions as a substitute for the harsh realities of competitive struggle to get ahead. And this is exactly what's kind of happening, is it not?
Yeah, and things were worse definitely back in 1958. This was before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, so there was segregation in America, and there was laws on the books that segregated the races and made blacks second-class citizens. But even then, Manning Johnson was seeing where this was going, what the communists are trying to do. So the 64 Civil Rights Act passes, and they have various laws in the book now. So there's no institutional laws like there used to be, and it's good that those laws are gone. Because in God's eyes, again, partiality is partiality. Mm-hmm. You do not place yourself above any other person or group because of whatever characteristic you can attach to your name.
But isn't this exactly what Black Lives Matter is pushing here, at least most of these things? One is to feel sorry for yourself.
Well, that's part of it, yeah. So
I mean,
and that builds anger. If you're a victim and you've been told you're a victim, it also builds envy. So when you have anger and envy put together, those are two pretty potent revolutionary emotions when you can mix them and then whip them up.
Right. And then the next one here is blame others for his failures. And now this one sometimes might be true, sometimes might not be true, but the whole idea is that it's going out and saying, you know, the whole reason that success isn't happening is that there's a ceiling that's been placed upon us and we need to go and blow the lid off this popsicle stand. That's essentially what Black Lives Matter is going out there saying. And of course, by doing that, it's postmodernism too, is that they're attacking the thing that's up at the top and just saying, you're wrong because you're up at the top. And so then something else comes at the top and that's wrong too. and it's just this never-ending cycle, and that's what's kind of going on. But it's blaming others for failures that are going on. That's really what Black Lives Matter is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now we understand there is racism or partiality. Really, there is injustice that happens and things like that.
And that's with each individual, and you can't.
Right.
That's where it's so important to try to change people's hearts. There are people that were. I had a friend who was in the Black Panthers, which is a black supremacist movement, and then he got married, and his wife kind of led him to the Lord, and he wanted nothing to do with that. Was just a sweetheart of a guy, and
Praise the Lord.
yeah, I mean, last time I saw him, I gave him a big hug, and that wouldn't have been what he'd want to do when he was a younger man, and but yeah, that's the transformation, the transformative power of Christ, the Holy Spirit coming to you once He becomes your Savior to change these things about you that were even intrinsic to your nature, that you're no longer that person. So that's what the real, rather than trying to pit us against each other and build up anger on both sides, which goes to the race war that the communists want, that Satan wants to see this nation destroyed, we go to each individual and try to change your heart by being a good example of how a person should not be partial. We can't force you by law, or we can't take from people that claim that they're being oppressed, take from others that they claim are oppressing them. These are feelings, and these are unwarranted.
Mm-hmm.
You put these blocks in people's minds. If you convince somebody that they can't get ahead, if they believe it, it's true, they can't. But it's not the environment around them that can't get them to get ahead or won't let them get ahead. It's the poison inside them that they believe that. And now they're victims perpetually. And of course, a person of that mind is easily going to be manipulated into the sorts of things we're seeing in the streets today. So that's...
And just one other one here. It's ignore countless opportunities around him. Is there any nation in the entire world that has more opportunities than the United States?
Well, you used to come here for two reasons. Either you were brought over on slave ships, which was absolutely evil, or that slavery is intrinsic everywhere. And Manny Johnson talks about it. White men sold white men for slaves. Black men sold black men for slaves. Mm-hmm. But people came over here for liberty and freedom and opportunity. And if you can't make it in the United States today, there's no more better place on earth for opportunity in the United States. If you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere.
That's right. Absolutely. We see here, I kind of want to end with your conclusion, because I think that this is just a pretty good conclusion. You say, kneeling during the national anthem, burning flag, tearing down statues, and like behaviors are about obliterating symbols of our heritage and history. You see, Western civilization and the foundation it's built upon, Christianity, are the ultimate targets of the revolution. And I just want you to talk about that here for just a little bit, Patrick, because I think this is vital for people to understand, because Western civilization was essentially answering the Greek philosophers' tremendous questions, like Plato when he asked, what is objective justice? And it's answering it with the Ten Commandments, answering it with the Christian foundation for morality. That's what Western civilization is. It's built upon Christianity. How is Black Lives Matter and Antifa, well, we'll go ahead and throw that in there, and really the left, the Marxist, all these people, how are they attacking Christianity ultimately? I mean, why would they do that? I mean, did Marx care about Christianity?
No, Marx was an atheist, he claimed. Although atheistic in his thinking, it's funny how many atheists that say there is no God certainly hate God.
Right.
Because Karl Marx says my objective in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. So he linked those two together, which is interesting. That Marx himself linked capitalism with Christianity and God. And the interesting there again, that system of governance is one where you get to go out based on your own work ethic and effort and ambition, work and keep what you've earned and decide what you do with what you've earned and build a life for yourself. These other systems of governance are not like that. You are property of the government, especially communism. Property of the government, you'll be told what to do and if you can live or die. So the most just system is one where you get to make your own decisions. And you suffer consequences for making bad decisions, but you also get the rewards of good decisions and good work and efforts. Thomas Edison, the famed inventor, said that, to the effect, I'll have to memorize this so I can do it precisely sometime. But he said most people miss opportunity because it's dressed in coveralls and looks like hard work.
And that's true.
It is true. The And I also talk in this article about white privilege, which is a concept termed by a communist, Noel Ignatieff, 1967, where he's trying to get people now to feel guilty there's white privilege. And it's part of that society is rigged against you, minorities. You don't have a chance because all white privileges, all white people are racist, every last one of them, and that you can't get ahead until the society's torn down and destroyed. Well, these are all, again, justifications of the original communist goal of what? Of destroying this nation, of destroying Western civilization, exactly what Antonio Gramsci said. These people are good at sticking the message. They're also very good at changing the way the message is being presented to make it more acceptable to you, to fool you, to get you to be a part of their movement. And that's what's happened today. People, good people that don't know any better, are being sucked into this movement going, well, you know, we're against racism. This is a good thing. And guess what? Being against what we call racism is a good thing.
That's right.
It's not of God, certainly. It's of Satan. But they've tricked you, and they're using racism and stirring up hatred and foment between blacks and whites in these different groups for the express part. We don't care what burns down in that conflagration. We don't care how many people die in that conflict. We just want it destroyed. So if you're going to go along with that, and it's happening in churches, that's right. The terrible thing. Mm-hmm. You've got churches, these social justice churches. And I just watched a local church, I figured they'd be up to it, and they were, on the 7th of this month, a whole sermon on this justice and all this social justice nonsense, which is nothing more than Marxism that's been put in the church and given Christian lingo to support the revolution from within the church. Because if the church is not going to act against it, that's our last bastion in this country. Right. If we can't even get Christians to recognize the enemy and the evil of Satan himself through these movements and where it comes from and seeing the background, and you still decide to align with it, the cause is lost.
Yeah. You know, ultimately, right now, we don't get to pick our fight. The hand has been dealt, so to say, and we have to play what's before us. And if your church isn't standing up for biblical view of racism, the biblical worldview of racism, this idea that we're all of one race, and so therefore all lives do matter, and they're intrinsic, and it is from God. They have intrinsic eternal value from God because they're made in the image of God. If it's coming down that they're virtue signaling and they're bowing down to this Black Lives Matter nonsense and garbage, let me tell you this here. You need to get out of that church. Mm-hmm. You need to run. And that's what most of the churches within the Cedar Valley are. That's what most of the churches in Iowa are. That's what most of the churches within the United States are. Now, of course, there's some good ones. And if you're going to a good one, you're saying, that's not my church. My church is preaching the Word of God. We're standing for the Word of God. And I know it without a doubt. And they've spoken to these issues, and they've done the right things. Well, good. Support that church. Give it everything you have.
But be on your guard, too, because these forces are trying to infiltrate.
Right. By everything you have, I'm not saying go and empty out all your coffers. I'm saying go and actually work for the ministry. I mean, hey, if God leads you to empty out your coffers, go ahead and do that, too. But
mine's already empty.
yeah. I was going to say, that's kind of how mine started. So you've heard about the pastor went up to the missionary afterwards, and they took a love offering. And he turns to the missionary, and he says, well, sir, there must have been a lot of love here. And he goes, why? Well, because there wasn't too much offering. But anyway, that was a terrible joke.
We like those in the Shine Light Podcast.
That's kind of my style.
Par for a course.
Yeah. But when it comes to this here, the lot has been cast. The battle is before us. The lines have been drawn. You're either on the right side or you're not on the right side. Either the right side or the wrong side. Your church is either on the right side or the wrong side. Your pastor is either on the right side or the wrong side. And you need to make sure you're on the right side, the biblical side. Because how you end this, Patrick, this is absolutely perfect. You know, right now there are a lot of people who are bowing down and they're literally kneeling and chanting and reciting, repeating after me, religious liturgy of avowing themselves to Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm. Or even bowing down because out of extreme guilt to say you're white and you bow down to a black person or kiss their shoe. I've seen some of these videos.
So Dan Cathy shine the shoes, right?
Yeah. These are deceived people, again, showing partiality and feeling inferior because of what they've been taught. But realize this. This is a political movement, and Satan always works through political means in the world. He attacks and destroys cultures, but he wants to seize political power. That's what it's about with him. It's what it's about with communist political power. You and I as Christians still have our duties as Christians. We have the duty to stand for the faith, to stand for the truth, And what we're doing right here is telling you the truth on what's going on out there so you don't fall for it. But there's still lost souls, and these people are also lost souls. Some of them can be reached, many of them cannot. We still make the effort. If they're not wanting to hear, if they're wanting to fight and argue, move along. You're not to keep casting your pearls between swine, so to speak. But in this time of unrest and trouble, perhaps this will present us an opportunity where it wasn't existing before. But the bottom line is this nation. We say, well, God, come and save our nation from this mess. Quite frankly, we put ourselves in this mess. We voted people into office. We've allowed the liberals to take control of the education system, the media. All this has happened over the decades in time. You study this stuff, it becomes very apparent. We brought this mess upon ourselves. We are now reaping what we have sown. So would God want to come in and say, okay, well, I'm going to give you guys a reprieve from this? He may. He may for a chance of repentance. But it's only repentance that's going to save this nation. God's not going to save us from what's going on right now just so we can continue to murder 60 million more babies, so we can continue to push atheism into school, outright godlessness, every sexual sin and perversion known to man, everything but the acknowledgement of God for who he is, the Creator, in Jesus the Son, who was sent to die for our sins. If we're going to continue just to continue life in the wicked way that we were living before all this recent unrest started happening, we're not worth saving, and God has ordained us for judgment. So if that's the case, and the Bible tells us at the end that things will get so bad that if Jesus didn't come back and put an end to it, no flesh would be saved. So we are in prophetic times, as the Bible talks about. And guess what? If that's the case, it gets worse from here. Not because God ordains it, because we choose to do nothing about it. Well, if that's the way it's going to be, then if the nation's going to go down, then it is going to be, I'm just going to sit back and watch. That's exactly why the nation's going down, because you've been sitting back and watching for too long. And we're called not to do that. Even if the fight seems hopeless, by principle and by our Christian duty, we're still supposed to fight, if nothing else, for the salvation of individual souls. So we are not relieved of duty. We're to hold until Christ himself comes and returns, and he sets things right, and he's the one who brings justice.
That's right, absolutely, and I can't say it any better than that, but I will close just how you ended this. One day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So therefore, for us here today, we say, all hail King Jesus.
The revolution will be over. All hail King Jesus.
Well, I really encourage you to go into to read this article here, because as you go and you read this article, which it's in the comments, what you'll find is that, wow, there's a lot more here. So we can even get to talk about, we can even go and get to talk about atheistic evolution and things like that. Abortion, that's what I'm looking for. Abortion and all of those things. So the Shining Light Podcast